नमस्ते एन्ड वेलकम फाइनेन्स फ्याक्ट्रीको ब्रान्ड न्यू एपिसोडमा यहाँलाई स्वागत छ। विगतको लास्ट एक एपिसोडदेखि हामीले फाइनेन्स फ्याक्ट्रीमा एउटा नयाँ सिरिज लिएर आएको छौँ, जसको हामीले टाइटल दिएको छौँ फाइनेन्सिङ एन्ड सस्टेनेबिलिटी इन नेपाल। र यो सिरिजमा कपाल अफ एपिसोड्सको थ्रु चाहिँ हामी नेपालमा भएको सस्टेनेबिलिटी एफर्ट, सस्टेनेबिलिटी प्र्याक्टिसेस र त्यसको लिङ्केज विथ फाइनेन्सको बारे कुरा गरिरहेको छौँ। लास्ट फर्स्ट एपिसोडमा हामीले सस्टेनेबल फाइनेन्सिङको कुरा गऱ्यौँ, इएसजीको कुरा गऱ्यौँ र त्यसको च्यालेन्जेसको कुरा गऱ्यौँ भने आज हाम्रो सेकेन्ड एपिसोडमा विल बी टकिङ अबाउट सस्टेनेबल इन्भेस्टिङ एन्ड विल बी सीइङ सस्टेनेबिलिटी फ्रम द लेन्स अफ प्राइभेट इक्विटी सेक्टर अफ नेपाल. So without further ado, let me start with the introduction of my guest, Siddhant Raj Pandey ji. Namaste.
Namaste.
Swagat sir. Thank you so much, first of all, for accepting our invitation. अनि अब सस्टेनेबल इन्भेस्टिङ र पिभिसी सेक्टरको बारे कुरा गर्ने हो भने हजुरभन्दा अरू बेटर गेस्ट आई डोन्ट थिङ्क देयर इज एनी वान इन नेपाल अहिले, किनभने यु आर द चेयरम्यान एन्ड सिइओ अफ बिजनेस अक्सिजन since October 2015, you are the chairman of the board of Nepal Private Equity Association since January 2023. So you have two hats that's so relevant for our topic of sustainable investing. So let's start with a brief introduction. How did you get started with the sector of sustainability or sustainable investing? So त्यो बारे start गरौँ न, र private equity के हो पनि त्यसमै जोड दिनु न.
I used to be a banker, but I've been in this field for the past 30 years, which is basically in banking, finance, investments. And about 10 years ago, when I left my last job, which was a CEO of Ace Development Bank, we started a company called White Lotus, which was meant to, which actually is supposed to bridge the gap between development and investments, finance. So we were doing it was a consultancy advisory company, which still exists. We were doing this, and this opportunity to bid for Nepal's first private equity fund called Business Oxygen from International Finance Group, which is part of the World Bank Group, came up. So we bid. There was an international tender. Out of, I think, 6-7 bidders, we beat everyone, and we did get the Business Oxygen deal. And since then, Business Oxygen is Nepal's first private equity climate-focused fund, because we have investments from, it's led by IFC, but we have investments from climate investment funds and the UK government's FCDO. So in every investments that we apply our skills and our investments in, we have to have ESG measures and climate-smart approaches.
Okay.
So now going back at that time, this whole private equity concept was completely new.
This was in 2015.
The whole thing started from 2014, but we got the deal in 2015. We started investing from 2016.
16, okay.
Okay, but it was it was a whole new concept. I mean, even for our investors. Earlier, when the donors would invest in Nepal, it was based on grants or soft loans or charity, But this is the first time that, the development finance institutions, which are basically the investment arms of the multilaterals and the bilaterals, multilaterals like the ADB, World Bank, bilaterals like the FCDOs, FMOs, they invested in private equity, which was a paradigm shift because it was based on commercial returns.
Okay.
And we understand that if anything needs to be sustainable, it has to be commercially viable. Otherwise, if you see in Nepal where you've had billions and billions of dollars of aid that's come in through the years, and if you look at the end result, you don't really see anything, because once the money is depleted, the project dies. So this sort of approach has brought about a new way where there's skin in the game from the investors, skin in the game from the entrepreneurs, so that it is up to the entrepreneurs to ensure that the business that we put our investments in is sustainable for their own sake. Right? And furthermore, we have a multi-pronged approach, which is basically to enhance the quality of the enterprise along with enhancing the ability of the entrepreneur. to make them practice and operate along the lines of international best practices.
Okay.
So, and in this area, where we deal with SMEs, small and medium enterprises, it's very important because SMEs are the backbone of any economy. And with the climate change in the horizon, we have to ensure that these SMEs are compliable, are compatible towards, at least they know how to deal with the effects of climate change. So that's where sustainable investments come in.
Okay. So let's talk about private equity or venture capital industry. Now, private equity bhandara, when we say venture capital, what do we understand? What is this industry? How is it different from banking or insurance? So what does PEVC mean?
Well, there are very many ways of looking at it. When we're looking at a venture fund, we're looking at investments that may not be EBITDA positive, which is earnings before income tax, depreciation, amortization, right? And we normally approach private equity with a semblance of VC, venture capital, and private equity. It is risk capital, basically.
Okay.
It is risk capital which is applied to investments in the form of equity in Nepal's case, but anywhere else there could be debt as well. But in Nepal, let me concentrate with whatever I'm saying is from the angle of Nepal, because this is what really affects us. We are still in the very nascent stage of what private equity is doing in Nepal, but it is basically risk capital where you share the risk in the form of equity, where you inject money, and it has to be commercially viable, meaning that there has to be positive returns. And in the case of Business Oxygen, it has an impact, and it has to follow ESG measures.
Okay. Maybe audience all out a small note. We have a whole series on private equity that we did in Finance Factory last year. So, हजुरहरुलाई चाहिँ in-depth information चाहिए as a private equity sector of Nepal भने चाहिँ please त्यो series हेर्नु होला. हामी तल description मा link पनि राख्दिन्छौँ. So back to the topic. Nepal Private Equity Association को बारे पनि केही भनिदिनु र नेपालमा चाहिँ what's the history of private equity? When did it start? र till now how has it evolved? So त्यो बारे हल्का भनिदिनु.
Okay, private equity in a structured manner has come in the past decade, about 8-9 years ago, with the advent of internationally funded offshore and onshore investment companies, right? Since then, but in an unstructured way, there was always family offices, friends who pooled money to invest in it, okay? That is a form of private equity. It's an alternative investment class. But when we talk about private equity as a structured manner, it is an asset class by itself. Okay, the private equity as an asset class that was introduced in Nepal in the past decade has been an alternative form of financing, whereas only debt used to be available through the banking system in Nepal or through the curb market, where people used to pay 36%, or still do actually. But private equity has been introduced to actually, especially from the vantage point of Business Oxygen, to address the missing middle. The missing middle are the people who have not been able to scale up their operations because of lack of capital. They may not have collateral securities to give to the banks, or even if they have loans from the banks, they may not be able to enhance that loan because the debt equity ratio has ceilinged off. And they need more equity to increase their debt. So that's where we come in. We invest risk capital in the form of equity and put a stake in the company. So that has been in the early stages when we started, people thought that this was like a grant. But it took a while, but now people have understood it. Now, there's been a big shift in the past couple of years where Security Exchange Board, CBON, has created a regulation called Specialized Investment Regulation, SIF, or in Nepali, Bishishista Lagani Kosh, which allows companies to come in and register with them and operate as a private equity firm, right? Now, NPA has about 20, Nepal Private Equity Association has about 23 members.
23, okay.
Yeah, so we cover all the alternative investment players in the market. May they be onshore FDI, offshore FDI, family and friends offices, merchant banks, or specialized investment fund regulated companies.
Okay.
So they're all under our. So they may have different orientations in terms of their investors, but they have all one thing in common, which is to invest as equity in the market.
Okay.
Some may go for larger projects, some may go for mid-level projects, SMEs. That's their investment risk appetite. But what NPA does is that we are trying to bring everyone under one. We have brought everyone under one umbrella so that we can introduce international best practices by bringing in experts from all over the world, imparting training on environment, social governance, valuation, structuring, deal sourcing, monitoring, whatever it takes for a private equity to operate and be sustainable. We are bringing in people from all over and imparting our own experience to our members, so that we all operate in this alternative space of investments and be successful. Because countries have shown that when you have investment diversity, it helps develop the country faster.
Okay. So now that we have talked about what is PEVC, what is NPA, BO2, now let's try to dig a little deeper into the topic of sustainable investing. So as a PE firm, when BO2 does its investment or when BO2 is practicing its business, kun aspects of private equity ma does this topic of sustainability or ESG come in? Like maybe due diligence ma huncha ki, when you're investing huncha ki, reporting or monitoring. So I'm just trying to bring the topic of various process as a PEVC firm. Where does the topic of sustainability and ESG come up?
Every investment has an impact. Okay, the outcome of every investment is an impact, whether it's in generating labor or creating more economic advances or profitability. But the difference is when we approach ESG measures or socially responsible investments, okay, SRIs as it's called, investment impact is an intentionality.
Okay.
So from the beginning of our assessment of our investment, during the investment process, that intentionality of impact is a focus.
Okay.
Okay. So we ensure how a company can be ESG compliant, what it needs to do pre and post investment, and they have to adhere to those requirements. So that is the difference. Okay. Now, for instance, we look at various things. The 4 things that we mainly look at, besides the performing standards, 8 performing standards that the IFC has brought about on ESG investing, is resource efficiency, okay, improving production and productivity, protecting physical assets, and access to finance.
Okay.
So the 8 performing standards all fall within the matrix of these 4 quadrants.
So these 4 matrix are coined by BO2?
No, it's not even coined. It's coined by climate investment funds.
Okay.
Okay, but it is also it overlaps the 8 performing standards.
Okay.
It's very broad. Okay, so we all our investments have to be aligned to those principles.
Okay, then as a entrepreneur, because when we talk about private equity, it's a lot about entrepreneurs getting investment from private equity firms. So as an entrepreneur, if I go to a PE firm that follows ESG standards, whichever ESG standard, or if I go to a PE firm that does not follow ESG standards, where would I see the difference?
Okay, the thing is, I have yet to see a firm that an entrepreneur that already follows this before our intervention. Okay, but you see, the thing is, there are costs to that intervention.
Okay.
The pivot has an expense, and normally the balance sheets of these companies that we invest in, they can't afford it. So being a DFI promoted investment, BO2 has the technical assistantship that enables that pivot. That is, we help them by bringing mentorship, training them towards ESG measures.
Okay.
So it is a very tall order, as well as very difficult for all companies to adhere, as well as to be able to follow these. And that's why it is important that we have private equity scaled up in this country, so that we can penetrate many more companies that we can introduce these measures to.
Okay. Then maybe could we focus on few real life cases of sustainable investing where you practiced, like you invested in a company because of impact, or you went there and you tried to implement ESG standards. So could you share a few real cases that you came across?
Sure. For instance, I'll give you one which investment didn't materialize because the Nepal government brought about this rule while we were midway into assessing this coffee company, that we couldn't get into primary agriculture as an FDI. But there was this company that was planning to expand its operations by buying more land. But in those days, this is about 8-9 years ago, the idea of climate change hadn't still quite gotten into the entrepreneur's plan, right? So when we were doing the assessment, we brought an international agro specialist who came in, and he assessed that expansion plan of that coffee company. And he said that, all right, now you're planting coffee at 900 meters. If you in the future are going to expect the same sort of quality of yield, then you need to go to at least 13 to 1400 meters to ascertain that the yield will be, the quality will be the same, because it was an export company. Now, let me tell you, I mean, besides there were other things too technically involved, but if that farmer had not had that intervention from that mentorship or technical assistantship, what would have happened is that he would have bought land maybe further down from his farm at the same altitude, and his entire investment would have been wasted, especially for coffee, right? So this intervention has enabled that to happen. So that is basically resilience, climate resilience, which is meaning that you're working to solve climate change by being resilient. Okay. Another case is that one of our solar companies does off-grid solar panel installations, and in a village not very far away, a very remote part of the village of Nepal, they went there and they installed a solar panel installation that enabled solar pumps to harness water from about maybe 150 feet below from the river, bring the water up, and it enabled drip irrigation. And now they're providing, they grow red chilies, and they sell it to Kathmandu. And not only that, that installation has helped electrification in the village. It has also helped every household to have water as well. So these are climate adaptable, climate resilient investments. This is what it's all about.
Okay.
Now, going further to companies that we have invested in Nepal's largest biogas fertilizer company. Those are companies that produce green products.
Okay.
Nepal's first biopellet company, which means biopellets are green coal that substitutes import of coal. So it is starting to produce. So these are climate-friendly investments, and companies that do not produce green investments. What we do is we help in assisting them to adhere to climate-smart approaches.
Okay.
Stuff like rainwater harvesting, using solar, being more climate friendly, etc.
Okay. Then maybe let's talk about the negative list. When you say you're practicing sustainable investing, is there like any set of businesses that you completely avoid to invest because they wouldn't be ESG compliant or they wouldn't be sustainable friendly?
Well, of course, I mean, there are many companies like that. There's um, the Nepal government's Nepal government's negative list is not based on that.
True.
It is based on something else. But of course, the IFC has its own negative list where we cannot get into investments of arms,
Okay.
alcohol, tobacco, etc.
Okay.
So that's there. But we also, when we, let's say, when we do assess our investments, we do not invest in companies that recruit child labor.
Okay.
Okay, number one. Number two, we do not invest in companies that are not committed to following the rule of law, which is labor laws, taxation laws. So all of these need to assure us that they will be able to comply with the rules of the land before getting our investments.
Okay. Then maybe one of the debated topic when it comes to sustainable investing, there are PE firms who just want to invest commercially because return is good. And Nepal is such a small market. If you try to focus on ESG, you wouldn't have a return that's compared to commercial return. There's a one school of thought, let's say. So how about the return comparability? Do you think just investing by being focused on ESG and sustainability would give you the same return as a PE firm that would focus on commercial investments only?
No, you need to wait. I'm not going to judge anyone's investment thesis. I mean, you need all kinds in any economy to take the economy forward. Some may just have commercial returns in mind. Some social impact funds may just have the impact and ESG as the prime driver for the investments. I mean, I think our economy is big for. Our economy should be able to accommodate all players, right? It is not true that companies that are ESG focused only are not profitable, but what we are looking at is the blended finance. See, what happened is what blended finance is basically a component of de-risking an investment. Suppose investment A is fully commercially focused, wants to have a high internal rate of return on the investments. But then investment B wants to look at the impact of it. So they will come with their blended finance investment to de-risk the investments of investor A. So that, here's one company that has both players, and then they can actually meet the requirements of financial return as well as the impact.
Could you elaborate on this blended finance topic?
Okay. Blended finance has been around, and BO2 is a part of blended finance, whereas IFC is commercially driven. Also, it has ESG measures, but you have climate investment funds and FCDO who would like to see the impact of it as well, right? So they have come and de-risked the investments by saying that, all right, fine, if there are certain environmentally or companies that will have high impact, our investments should be able to also invest in it. But BO2 is a finance-first model. We insist our process has ESG measures, climate-smart approaches, but predominantly we are commercially targeted, commercially viable. We only invest in commercially viable investments.
Okay.
But we have the climate impact as a focus as well.
Okay, then let's connect it with SDGs, because I think BO2 ko website we can find reporting on the SDG impact that you do. So could you please touch upon the topic of SDG and try to link it with sustainable investing?
SDG is basically a framework that actually sort of it formulates how impact investment is taking place. Now, there are 17 SDGs. This is the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, out of which our investments meet 10 of those SDG goals. So that's very good, actually. And what we do is we we measure those various targets on a biannual basis. So this whole SRI is basically driven. Socially responsible investments are driven by SDG targets as well.
Okay. Then now let's touch upon the topic of DFIs and entities like NPA that's focusing on capacity building. I know. So, what's the role that DFI, the development financial institutions, are playing in Nepal to promote sustainable investing or to promote sustainable development through private equity?
Okay. DFIs have been the only investors in private equity from abroad, FDI investments in Nepal. Like I mentioned earlier, it was a paradigm shift when IFC invested in BO2 from its traditional method of investments in equities, bringing in technical assistantship and all kinds of support. DFIs have so far been the only ones interested to do that, and they have the risk appetite because they know this market.
Which are the DFIs that's active in Nepal?
Well, in Nepal we have IFC with BO2. Then there's FMO. There's FMO. There's British International Investment. There's NOR Fund, Fin Fund, SDG, Swiss. The Swiss are here.
Swiss,
And between Business Oxygen and Dorma Fund, majority of the DFIs are with Dorma Fund, and then there are the bilaterals. And bilaterals, we have FCDO and BO2. We have the Climate Investment Funds, which is a blended finance player of the World Bank as well. And so there are quite a few European DFIs that are with Dorma Fund.
Okay. And how do they push the agenda of sustainability? Like, how does that work?
Well, I can't speak for the others, but I can speak for us. Is that, like I said, IFC's 8 performance standards and the PPCR matrix is what we have to follow in all our investments, which pretty much covers everything about ESG. So that's mandated in all our investments. And we have to report. Our social environment due diligence is done pre-investment. We have the social environment management systems in place. When we invest in a company, we appoint a SEMS manager, social environment management systems manager, in the companies that we invest in. We train them. We have a social environment management systems point person in our private equity firm that does pre-investment evaluation and post-investment evaluation, and annually we have the monitoring of each of these companies.
And as an entrepreneur or the company who takes fund from BO2, you provide capacity building and training for them to do that, right? Or how does that work? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Basically, I mean, it's a new thing for every one of them. I mean, there's so many. I mean, you have operation health systems, you have environmental systems that need to be changed. You have to make sure that the place has a good working environment. You make like hard hats, where if it's a production company, you have little things even such as fire extinguishers, etc. These are the things that we point out if they do not have it. The list is very long. Well, I can spend a whole half day talking to you about what needs to be done, but you get the idea that these are the basic sort of things. Little things like even medical kits, what to do, what are the SOPs, that they need to do if something happens.
Standing operating
processes that needs to take place if there's an emergency. These are sort of things that all need to be, not only that having policies, manuals from anti-harassment to HR to financial policies to doing what can be done if there's a case of emergency, all that. So all these processes are put into place after our intervention.
Okay. Then maybe let's look at this thing from the lens of the entrepreneurs, so you've been active since 2015 and practicing sustainable investing in Nepal. How has the attitude of entrepreneurs towards this topic evolved over the years? How challenging was it to find sustainable entrepreneurs when you started in 2015 and coming to 2023? How has that evolved?
Well, initially, when we started, our entire investment threshold was just $100,000 to $500,000. So our ticket sizes were small. So with that came the smaller entrepreneurs.
Okay.
But overnight, the government changed that in 2017 to 5 crores was the minimum, which was at that time 5 crore was our maximum.
So for one company, you had to invest 5 crore.
Yeah, that we couldn't do less than 5 crores. So of course, when you're looking at a big investment, you see that the awareness of the entrepreneur is greater as well. Okay, and they're more willing to adapt and adopt these measures. But let me give you some examples of how positively our intervention has affected these companies. In one company, it was a pharmaceutical company. Because of our investment in the company, an international investor from Korea, another pharmaceutical company, has come in and put equity.
Okay.
Okay, and in another company where from our small investment, an international company from Singapore has come in to scale the company up because of our investment, because they met all the processes along the lines of international best practices. The books were in order. They followed ESG measures. So these are the benefits. So a lot of entrepreneurs who are vying for our investments understand that it is not just the capital, but it is also the technical assistantship that we bring to the equation that will help them in the long run.
Okay.
Okay. So, in a few cases, because after the way we went in, and we don't allow double books of accounts, it has to be clean, it has to pay taxes, etc. For them to get, earlier they were not getting bank financing. But because of our intervention, a couple of years after we invested, they have been able to get bank financing as well.
Okay. So it looks like focusing on ESG from the start as an entrepreneur is kind of like it'll benefit you in the long run. Maybe in the short run, it looks like a lot of effort, a lot of cost, but in the long run, that's when the...
Well, I think for the sake of your viewers, let me just explain ESG in its as an acronym, but from each word. Okay, environment. Basically, when we're doing ESG investment, the E for environment is basically looking at a company and seeing how our intervention can lower the greenhouse gas emissions of the company, and how they can also ensure that their investments are not going to deteriorate the environment around them. Right? Socially, we look into saying how gender diverse is the investment. Do we have child labor in the company? How many women are in the board? How many women does the company employ? Okay, stuff like that. And then there's the governance issue. Does the company have a board? All our investments have to have a board. Are the board minutes minuted? Do they have independent directors? How many women are on the board as well, right? And do they follow transparency? So you put ESG together, you can just imagine if everyone followed all of those. It is about transparency. It is about following the rule of law. So it goes without saying that, in the long run, the company will do much better for itself. And, it becomes a more democratic way of running a company.
Okay. There may be another important topic of capacity building, because I think we do acknowledge that ESG or sustainable finance is a pretty new concept let's say in Nepal. So what are the initiatives that's helping to build this capacity in PVC sector or any other sector in Nepal? How is the capacity building working on?
Well, the thing is, like I mentioned, if the private equity doesn't have a separate fund that they can deploy into this, then it's not going to happen. I'll tell you frankly, it's simply not. It's very expensive. But Nepal Private Equity Association has taken that into account and is providing these services to our members and hoping that, where they have not had the ability to tap into these sort of expertise, Nepal Private Equity Association will be able to enable that. So that is what's happening right now.
Okay.
It just started, so we've done several already. But to tell you frankly, next week there is one on how private equity VC can how they can report on the IFRS system, which is the new accounting system. So these are things that are new, and we facilitate people, and we're getting people from Ernst & Young to do that for Nepal Private Equity.
Okay. Now let's zoom out a little bit from Nepal and focus on the international trend. So if we see the PVC industry across the world, like what's the trend that's going on, and where is Nepal when it comes to sustainable investing in PVC sector?
Well, there are two. There's private equity, and then there's the sustainability part. And those are two different things. Now, if I were to talk to you about private equity, we don't even need to go very far away. I think 50% of all FDI that comes into India, several $billion is private equity, in the form of private equity. So India is just zooming ahead on that front. Now, green SRI, social responsible investments, sustainable investments, we have yet to see how that happens. We see that the mature economies are way ahead. And it's because, the largest, Europe leads the race in terms of sustainable investments. United States and China, these are the three main, one continent, two, and China and US are heavily into green bonds. Green bonds are now we have about $2 to $3 trillion of green bond issuance. By 2025, we believe that there's going to be up to $5 trillion worth of green bonds issuance. So it shows that countries that are emitting the largest greenhouse gases are also investing a lot on ESG measures and green financing. It is almost like offsetting their carbon footprints by investing in these sort of products. I call it the mitigation of the guilt factor. Okay, but what's ironic is countries like Nepal, which emit about 0.02% of international greenhouse gases, have not been able to tap into that market at all.
And what could be the reason for that? Like, why is Nepal not being able to tap it? Is it regulatory thing, or is it because the government is not pushing the regulations in that front, or is it the PE firms? Where is the challenge, or where is the lack?
It's slowly starting to happen, I think, but I think we need to be more aggressive about it. In terms of green bonds, we don't have a functioning bond market to begin with. We need to get our own fundamentals together before we can attract that sort of investment. And there are a lot of risks involved with our system here, okay? So we need to do a lot of internal homework. But the government has not been proactive enough. GCF, Green Climate Financing, has been involved, and the World Bank has also been involved in terms for many years, working with Nepal Renewable Energy Program, and now also they're working with CREF, Climate Renewable Energy Fund. So it is happening slowly, but we need to be able to sell our story better, I think.
Okay, and let's touch upon the regulations front. You did mention that there's this
Specialized Investment
Fund regulation that has come up. I think it was in 2019, 2020. So what's the regulations around ESG that, I don't know, Sevon or any other body that touches PVC has brought up on?
There aren't any.
Are they thinking about it? Like, where are they with it?
I don't know, but I know the central bank has brought out a ESG policy where all banks have to follow in terms of their credit portfolio. But it's not about ticking the box, you see. What's important is monitoring. It is about monitoring and evaluating and keeping an eye on whether someone is following it or not, whether there's greenwashing happening, you know. It's all about green taxonomy, you know.
Could you elaborate on the green
Green
taxonomy?
taxonomy is basically a framework where to check whether the investments are socially responsible or not, you know, socially environmentally responsible. Are they following the ESG measures or not? So that is framework. But there's another big problem is that we do not have one particular standard. There are very many standards.
True.
And whose do you follow? So these are things that, you know, we have to. It's an evolving thing, and I think it's happening. There's a lot of ground that has been covered in the past year, so we should see some more standardization in the days to follow.
Okay. You did mention the term greenwashing in the last sentence. So could you elaborate on greenwashing and what's the challenge around it?
It is basically investing, saying that you're raising green funds and not applying that towards environmentally responsible investments. That's greenwashing.
Any other examples of greenwashing that we've seen?
Well, this is where you know, you have to have a good framework to measure it. You know, I mean, I can't give you any examples in Nepal that I know of, you know, but I mean, you hear about all kinds of stories about how people invest in. Okay, I'll tell you what greenwashing is in a very simple, easy way. It is buying an electric vehicle, right, and then using a diesel generator to charge it. That's greenwashing. Okay, that's greenwashing. So.
Okay. So we're almost towards the end of our series. Maybe one final question. What is the future of sustainable investing in Nepal? Where would it go? What's your viewpoint on that?
I think it's very important that we have sustainable investment interventions. Climate change is a reality. SMEs are vulnerable to that. Our agriculture, farmers are vulnerable. Our factories are vulnerable to it. Look at what's happening with just last week. We're reading about 30 hydropower projects got flooded in eastern Nepal.
Okay.
Right? Now, we need to have sustainable investments to ensure that they can adapt to that change in the future. So how do you deal with glacial blocks, flooding the downstream? You know, what can be done to secure the communities around it? You may not be able to mitigate climate change, but you can adapt to it. Okay, so that's where I call it adaptive resilience financing. You know, where you can't change. I don't think we can change what's happening with climate change, and this whole 1.5, 2 degrees is probably not going to be able to be arrested. So we have to live with that. But how do we deal with the very violent monsoons or the very the droughts that are coming, where we have long periods of no rain? How are we going to deal with agriculture in that scenario? We are already facing that here. You see, I mean, our paddy production is affected every monsoon because either there's too much rain or there's no rain.
True.
So even when it rains, I remember 15 years ago, monsoon rains were steady. Now it's like the whole sky is about to burst open, and when it does rain, it feels like your roof is going to be torn away, right? And it's very violent. So these are actual, real-life examples of what's happening, and we have to be ready in order to deal with them. And one way of being ready to do this is to intervene in terms of awareness. Let people know how they can adapt to this sort of, or be resilient to it.
Okay.
So it's very important.
Then definitely the last question, because our audience are finance students and finance professionals. So for them, as a finance student or professional, what's the scope, like as a career in sustainable investing or in the field of sustainability in Nepal? Is it a career that you could take forward?
Well, there's two parts to it, okay? There's the environmental side,
Mm-hmm.
ecological side, and there's the private equity side. And you've got to, I mean, finance students are very much needed to be able to assess whether an investment is going to be viable or not, okay? Look, I mean, let's be realistic. No one's going to come and put money where there's not going to be a return. So you've got to make sure that, you know, the investments that you're making is, number one, has the capacity to give you a return, at least much higher than what you've invested, right? Secondly, you look at, you know, how through that investment you can make a change in the environment.
Okay. So with this, we come to the end of our episode. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing the knowledge and experiences that you have gathered through so many years. So thank you so much. But
Thank you,
before that, we
Akrity.
have a gift voucher for you. It's a gift from Dental Park.
Ah.
It's a dental clinic in Bauddha. So you
Okay.
have a special discount voucher there.
Ah.
And if our audience wants to visit the clinic, so please do. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So
Akriti.
Eddie Monday, we are at the end of this episode. So we will bring few more episodes in the coming series where we'll be talking about other sectors and talking about sustainability from the angle of other industries. So keep listening, keep watching, and if you have any comments, any remarks, any feedback, please put it down in the comment section. And we will put Miro LinkedIn and Siddhantji's LinkedIn in our description. So please do follow us. And if you have any feedback or if you want to reach out to us, feel free to do so. So with this, thank you and have a good day.